This morning, you did something you probably didn't even think about. You reached for a cup, you waited for it to brew, you needed it before you could function. But the real answer to why is far stranger than you think. That ritual didn't start in a coffee shop. It didn't start in Italy or Seattle or anywhere you'd expect. It started in a kingdom most people alive today have never heard of. A highland empire in East Africa. A place called Kaffa. Yes, that's where the word comes from. Kaffa was a real kingdom, tucked into the mountains of what is now southern Ethiopia. It rose sometime around the 14th century. It had its own king, its own army, its own trade networks stretching deep into the continent. And it sat on top of something the rest of the world didn't know it needed yet. Wild coffee forests, growing exactly the way nature designed them. Untouched, unfarmed, older than the kingdom itself. The historian William Euchers, who spent years documenting the origins of coffee culture, traced the plant's earliest human contact back to this exact region. Not a coffee house, not a farm, a forest. Here's where it gets strange. The people of Kaffa didn't drink coffee the way you do. They ate it, ground berries mixed with animal fat, rolled into small balls, carried by warriors and travelers as an energy source. A primitive energy bar, centuries before the concept existed. It wasn't about ritual, it wasn't about mornings, it was about survival on long journeys through dense terrain. Think about that for a second. The thing sitting in your kitchen right now started as trail food for soldiers. So how did it become a drink? The transformation happened slowly and mostly outside of Kaffa itself. Traders carried the beans north, across the Red Sea, into what is now Yemen. And it was there, inside Sufi monasteries, that coffee changed forever. Sufi mystics needed to stay awake through long nights of prayer and chanting. Someone figured out that roasting the beans, then steeping them in hot water, produced something different. Something that sharpened the mind instead of just filling the stomach. This wasn't a casual discovery. It was deliberate. Religious devotion basically engineered the modern cup of coffee. The historian Ralph Haddix, who wrote one of the most detailed academic accounts of early coffee culture, found something fascinating buried in old Yemeni and Ottoman records. Coffee wasn't just tolerated by religious authorities. In many cases, it was encouraged because it helped worshippers stay alert during devotion that could stretch past midnight. Alertness, focus, staying awake for something that mattered. Sound familiar? From those monasteries, coffee spread into the cities. Mecca, Cairo, Damascus, and with it came something the world had never really seen before, a new kind of public space. The coffee house, not a tavern built around alcohol and forgetting, a space built around conversation, debate, chess, poetry, and staying sharp. These early coffee houses were dangerous, at least to the people in charge. Rulers in several cities actually tried to ban them, not because of the drink itself, but because of what happened when people gathered around it. Ideas spread, political opinions formed. Ottoman officials at times worried that coffee houses were breeding grounds for dissent, places where regular people debated the decisions of their leaders over a cup that kept them awake long enough to argue. A kingdom in the Ethiopian highlands accidentally created one of history's first engines of public opinion. By the 1500s, coffee had fully taken over the Ottoman Empire. Istanbul filled with coffee houses called kahve-khane. Merchants used them to close deals. Scholars used them to debate philosophy. And the ritual, the actual act of preparing and drinking coffee slowly, deliberately became just as important as the caffeine itself. That's the part most people miss. The ritual wasn't an accident, it was the entire point. European travelers who visited the Ottoman Empire brought the habit home with them, but they also brought something else. A completely wrong story about where it came from. For centuries, most of Europe had no idea coffee originated in an African kingdom. They credited Arabia, they credited the Ottomans. Kaffa, the actual birthplace, faded into the background of its own invention. That's worth sitting with. The place that started it all got written out of the story almost immediately. Modern science has actually confirmed what Kaffa's oral history always claimed. Dr. Aaron Davis, a coffee researcher at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, has spent years studying wild coffee genetics in Ethiopia's remaining highland forests. His research shows those forests still contain the highest genetic diversity of coffee plants found anywhere on Earth. In other words, the biological evidence lines up perfectly with the old story. This region isn't just where coffee was first used, it's where coffee, as a species, essentially comes from. And yet those same forests are disappearing. Climate pressure and deforestation are shrinking the genetic ancestor of a drink consumed by roughly 2 billion people every single day. 2 billion people drinking something that traces back to one shrinking forest in one forgotten kingdom. Kaffa itself didn't survive as a power. It was eventually absorbed into the expanding Ethiopian Empire in the late 1800s. Its royal line ended, its independence gone. The kingdom that gave the world its name for coffee stopped existing as a kingdom at all. But the ritual it accidentally created never stopped spreading. It moved through monasteries, through empires, through colonial trade routes, through your local coffee shop speakers playing quiet music while people sit with laptops, doing exactly what Ottoman scholars did 5 centuries ago, staying alert, staying focused, gathering to think. Why does this matter to you specifically this morning? Because that cup you made wasn't just about caffeine. It was a ritual passed down through Sufi mystics who needed to stay awake for devotion, through Ottoman coffee houses that terrified their own rulers, through a kingdom whose name survived even after the kingdom itself didn't. You're not just drinking a beverage. You're repeating a 1400-year-old habit of sharpening the mind before doing something that requires focus. The setting changed. The purpose didn't. So tonight, when you set your coffee maker for tomorrow morning, you're not starting your day. You're continuing one.